Hi, Steve Sink. We're going to play with some clouds. I've got Mandelbulber 3.22. I'm sure later versions will also work until the cloud functions get materially changed by Christoph Marczak. Let's get into it. Now, I do not have clouds mastered by any means, I assure you, but we're going to do our best here, just try to figure some things out. I am going to actually go to load example and just type in clouds right here under filter. Right there. I want to play with this one right now, this green one. Now in this case, you can't see through these clouds, so there's no, the fractal is still there actually. We're using Mandelbulber Power 2 as the formula, and we need to go to the effects pane down here. We want to go to volumetric, and this is where the clouds are. So I've loaded clouds to fract, and I want to add some of these parameters to my animation real quick. So let me speed through that. This will let me get back to all these settings as we play with them. We can go, and to keep it, we can get the defaults at any time, but we want to consider these as the scene defaults, if that makes sense. We're going to turn that parameter on. Everything is loaded to keyframe anim. Okay, that's good for now. And then I'm actually going to go add keyframe. There we go. Now, anytime I make a change in this stuff, like that, I can get back to it by just hitting my scene like that, which will re-render it. I'm going to turn on auto refresh until it gets annoying, and then we'll turn it off. So essentially, clouds, it's like I said, it's here on the volumetric pane. We also have up above here fog based on distance and also glow. The glow in this scene is doing really nothing right now. And I have auto refresh, so it will auto refresh. The fog with distance is putting this haze that's in the background on the edges in there, which we do want just for the scene, because without it, it's a little more plain, a little more sharp too. It all depends what we're going for, but we want this kind of hazy look, so I do want fog based on distance back in the scene. We're not going to play with that at all, but we are going to keep it on. Now, down here in the clouds pane, we have, of course, the basic color itself, which, of course, you can change this to any color. I don't know if I actually added the color to the animation. No, I didn't. So let me add the color to the animation so I can play with it a little bit. If I were to change this to blue, first off, before I do, let me tell you that everything in this scene, the fractal and the plane here, are all getting covered by the clouds. And we'll talk about how and why that's happening. But right now, we're just going to look at the color. If I want to change that to blue, it's going to change all the clouds in the scene to blue. Like so. Let's change it back by clicking on our thumbnail we have here in the animation pane. Next, we're going to go on to some of these parameters. Noise iterations, the default is 5, and the distance between 5 and 8 is not noticeable to me. Let's double it to 10. Still see absolutely no change in the scene. So this is not going to do much for us at all. Random seed, of course. Now what this does, it basically the scene will look the same, but the cloud will have shifted in several subtle ways. Let me double that value and you'll see the entire scene shifted, and we'll double it again and shift it again. Let's have it 50, 25. Again, doesn't materially change anything. It's just the random seed, and it does change the scene. If you're trying to get back to a specific exact cloud pattern, you're going to need to use the same random seed, and if you change that, you'll never match them up again. This randomize button just randomizes the random seed. In this scene, opacity is doing a lot of work. Right now, it's cranked up to 320 at the default value of 10. You can barely even see the cloud. Here is the actual fractal, which is a Mandelbulber Power 2, and it's covered in this green clouds. When we go back to the opacity of 320, Yeah, 320. You'll see quite a bit of difference in there. I actually want to move the lights real quick just so I can see that scene a little easier. And I want to put the lights coming straight on. There we go. 30 degrees is fine. I'm going to make it exactly 30 just because I'm a bit anal about it. And see, we can see quite a bit more detail with the shadowing of this. And speaking of shadowing, where I had to take penetrating light off on here, it's not doing anything in this scene. But shadows themselves, back in, let's see, effects, volumetric, down to clouds. We just did opacity. I kind of want to jump down here to receive shadows here real quick just to show you. It makes it look just like almost a 2D shape with the receive shadows turned off. We'll look at that more in a second. I jumped ahead. So opacity 320 versus the default of 10, I think it was. Density and period. Now density to me says how close are the individual little cloudlets, and period suggests how many are there altogether. So let me take that to a default value of 1, and you'll see it makes one big massive cloud shape without individual clouds. Take it back to a period of 0.625, you see lots of little clouds. Density, on the other hand, the default is 0 to 50, and you see you still have lots of little clouds, but they're a little further apart and there's spaces between them. And if we go back to the scene default of 0.311, and let's double it. See, that doubles it, and they are so dense that it essentially almost goes back to one smooth, solid cloud again. So doing the most work in this scene, I think, is opacity, but density and period are also doing stuff. Ambient light. Now, the ambient light is on 0. We're ready to crank that up to 1. It's going to totally wash out the scene like that. It's taking the ambient light and just cranking it up. So as I slowly back off of that, there's half, there's a quarter, and so on. You'll see how ambient light is working. In this case, we want no ambient light. There's a number of cases in which ambient light would work well in the scene, but we don't need it here. Visible light and trap light boost. Now, this is not going to show us anything until we actually turn a trap light on to the shape, and we'll do that later. We'll skip visible light and trap light boost for now. I had already jumped into receive shadows. We'll turn that back off, and I'm going to move the camera around, knowing I can always get back to where we were, and you'll see that it is not a 2D shape. There's actually definition and shape and depth here. It's just very subtle. The clouds casting no shadows give our eyes very little clues as to how this shape actually works. As soon as I turn on receive shadows, boom, suddenly there's an amazing amount of detail. And we'll go back to the default. See, there's an amazing amount of detail. Okay, one more time. That's just amazing to me how flat that looks. It literally looks like a 2D shape without the shadows. Sharp edges will not do anything in our scene except basically turn the fractal, the cloud off. You'll see a haze over the floor here. I'd have to do some particular settings to get you to see how sharp edges would work, and frankly, I don't even know what those settings are. So we'll skip sharp edges for another time, another investigation. Cloud movement speed here is only going to be visible, or we're only going to see its effect in an animation. In a still image, we're not going to see the clouds move. I could set this to an uncanny speed, and it would look like we're just seeing them frozen this moment. If I had another keyframe here, we could see that it was moving at a great speed in the X, Y, or Z axis. Then we got shape from primitive. Let me just demonstrate real quick that if I add another primitive shape to this mix, let's say a cone, and place move primitive, let me move it over to here, and move it back in the scene a little bit. you'll see that Mandelbulber has also attached the same green cloud that's on the plane and that's on our fractal. It's also attached it to this cone. Let's go back to effects, and I'll show you next what's going on here. We skip sharp edges because all it does in this scene is just zero out everything. We talked about cloud movement speed. Shape from primitive is a little more complicated. In this case, we can make the cloud, if we had it at the default settings, we can make the cloud fill that cone, and the cone would disappear and there would be still clouds in the shape of that cone. So unfortunately, you can't make the fractal disappear and have the clouds remain in the shape of the fractal, but you can have the primitives disappear and have the clouds remain in the shape of that. And that would be done here on shape from primitive. Plane shape, I honestly am not sure how that works. I was playing with it, trying to figure it out. It definitely changes this particular scene, but I can't figure out exactly what's going on here. I'll have to come back with some more clarity on plane shape later. Obviously, cloud layer height, cloud center, geometry rotation. These are all sub parameters of this plane shape parameter. But I don't know quite how it works. I can see that it does make a change to our scene, though. But doing the most amount of work of any of the parameters for this particular scene, apart from this opacity set to 320, is distance from fractal and cloud layer height. So if I take this back to the default of distance from fractal all the way to a 1, it should just blow out the whole scene and just show us the fractal with clouds way off in the distance. This parameter is doing a lot of work to keep the cloud right next to the edge of the fractal. Cloud layer height also is doing some work here. If I set it to the default of 0.5, we're going to get a very, 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 very thick cloud. So taking us back to our default scene, accuracy control, details accuracy, approaching DE multiplier, clouds DE multiplier. When I was playing with that, at least with this scene, I couldn't really notice much difference in the scene changing with those values. So I would assume that would tighten things up a bit if I increase the scene accuracy to 2. But when I do that, I don't see an appreciable difference in the scene whatsoever. Nope, I did not. So I'm going to take that back to 1. So that is most of the functions of a cloud. We didn't get to see cloud movement because of an animation. I also haven't quite figured out what plane shape does. And I also haven't done a trap light yet. So let's set up a quick trap light. Let's go effects, background. Let me make that black so we can see what we're doing. Let me go back to volumetric, go to the top, turn off auto refresh because I'm going to do a bunch of changes. I don't want it hanging up on me. I'm going to go to 0.625 by halving it several times. Let me go back to lights on effects, and all the way at the bottom of lights we're going to have orbit trap lights. So I'm going to turn on orbit trap lights, but I want to set the minimum iterations to 0. I want probably no other things except I want to change the color to gold so I can see it well, and maybe intensity on surface to 0 because I want a fractal orbit trap light. I want orbit trap light around the fractal. I don't want the fractal itself to light up, at least not in this scene. I see I want to set this to sphere, and then we're ready to roll. Okay. Then we'll see trap lights, and let's go back to clouds, back under the volumetric, clouds, visible light, and trap light boost. What happens if we set that to 2 and then crank our scene up again? Ah ha ha! Look at that. That just lit up our shape. Let me go to 4 on that. Yeah, I guess it's pretty much. Oh, yeah, that did light up quite a lot more. That's pretty cool. All right, so that is going to be visible light and trap light boost, which seems to be very worthwhile if you have a trap light going on in your shape. Now, we can't move the fractal out of the scene to leave the cloud behind, but we can move the primitives out of the scene to leave the shape of that behind by doing shape from primitive. And I believe if I were to set it on cone right now and hit render, the cone's going to disappear. The clouds are supposed to remain if they're thick enough to see without the fractal. So yeah, I've used that before, and I'll have to come back to that. I'm not as strong on shape from primitive. I definitely have made a cylinder in the middle of the scene with a cloud boiling away in the middle of it, and it had to do with shape from primitive. Maybe it's when you get into plane shape, clouds, layer height, and all that stuff, and play with that. All right, so that's a brief tutorial on the clouds. There are more advanced features that can be done. Let me turn that back to none. Get the scene back going with, I want a cloud cover here, and I want clouds over there, and I want clouds on the floor, and I want the trap lights lighting up the scene. There we go. Okay, that is it for now. Good luck. I'll post settings. Well, actually, all the settings are in Cloud 02, and you just saw me play with them, and here they are. You're looking at them. So good luck. Have fun. Hope this helps at least a little bit.